And if Boychuk misses any time, he would join the ranks of Nathan Horton, Rich Peverly, and Zdeno Chara as big names missing big games for the Bees this season. Injuries can force a team's hand at the trade deadline. And when Bees GM Peter Chiarelli tells the Globe's Kevin Paul DuPont that he thinks the Bruins are close to making a deal, Chiarelli's track record backs it up. Peter Chiarelli is approaching his 6th NHL trade deadline as the Bruins general manager. And for the most part, he has been active.
3-on-1, score!
Beginning at the 2007 trade deadline, Chiarelli acquired Brandon Bochenski for Kris Versteeg. And short-term, Bochenski did score 22 points in 31 games. But Versteeg scored 22 goals to help Chicago win the Cup. A week after that move, Chiarelli acquired Andrew Ference and Chuck Kobasu for Brad Stewart, Wayne Primo, and a draft pick. The departed players were components of the now infamous Joe Thornton trade.
Andrew can play both sides. He moves the puck. He's a tough player.
Chiarelli wasn't finished dealing. He picked up Aaron Ward for Paul Mara, as well as Dennis Weidman for Brad Boyes. The Bruins GM stood pat at the 2008 deadline. But a year later in 2009, he acquired Mark Recchi and Steve Montador in separate deals on March 4th. Recchi would have a huge impact on the organization. The following year, Chiarelli made some small deals prior to the deadline that included picking up Steven Kampfer and then pulled the trigger on a 5-player deal that featured defenseman Dennis Seidenberg.
Seidenberg tries to wrap around and scores! Dennis Seidenberg!
Chiarelli acquired forward Chris Kelly from Ottawa for a draft pick.
Riders backhand through the crease, loose. Kelly scores! Chris Kelly ties it up!
On February 18th, Chiarelli acquired the final 2 players of the Stanley Cup championship team. He picked up Rich Peverly and a prospect from Atlanta for Mark Stewart and Blake Wheeler.
Price gives it away to Peverly. He scores! Rich Peverly! Isn't that rich?
Chiarelli then completed the deal that everyone had speculated about for months by acquiring Thomas Caberlet from Toronto for prospect Joe Colborne and 2 draft picks.
After 39 long years, the Cup is back home. The Bruins are 2011 Stanley Cup champions.
All right, so Peter Chiarelli certainly has been busy in previous trade deadlines, although he says that big deals aren't there to be made this time around. For more, let's bring in TSN's Jamie McLennan to kind of put Chiarelli to the truth meter. Jamie, if you wouldn't mind, how busy do you think the Bruins will be? Because they do have 2 pretty glaring needs. They need a top 6 forward, and they need a defenseman. So how busy is the Chiarelli brain trust going to be?
Well, I'm sure they're very, very busy. The problem is finding a dance partner, finding somebody that wants to make it work for both sides, and then you look at cap situation to make sure that it fits within your structure. I still believe that Chiarelli has something up his sleeve. It may not be a blockbuster deal, but it's certainly going to be something that when you take a look back and say, geez, that was a smart deal to bring in some depth, to bring in some character, and somebody who fits into that type of mold, that Boston Bruin hockey.
Well, Jamie, you talk about a blockbuster move, and really the biggest blockbuster name that we've heard for the last month or so is Rick Nash. Now, if Nash doesn't go anywhere, who steps up as maybe a second-tier blockbuster name to take that place?
Geez, you know, if Rick Nash doesn't go, you look at Steve Ott that was out there that was real attractive to a lot of teams. It's the type of player that you hate to play against, but you certainly want on your team.
Yeah, the Bruins can certainly testify to hating to play against Steve Ott. Let's get you out on this, Jamie. Let's get sort of a bold prediction from you. This time, Monday night, what is the biggest trade deadline story that people are going to be talking about?
Wow, you know, I would think that Brian Burke wants to make a big splash and get his team right back into a playoff spot. As far as bold predictions, I would love to see a real big name that you wouldn't expect, like you say, like an Ott or a Habby Boulin out of Edmonton, who has another year at 3.75 to go to a team that can maybe help them for a stretch drive.
Jamie McLennan from TSN, kind enough to join us. We put you on the spot, and we appreciate it. Thank you, Jamie.
No problem. Thanks for having me.